Psych, lore, and insight.
Welcome to Psych Lore and Insights. I'm Sarah, your host and a psychiatric nurse practitioner. Also joining us is my brother Steve, an Irish-blooded, natural-born storyteller. We mix history, lore, and true crime with psychiatry, psychology, and all things related to the human psyche. And wow, we have a great story today about June and Jennifer Gibbons, also known as the Silent Twins. In addition, we'll explore the delusional phenomenon of Folie et Deux. I'm not giving any medical advice nor diagnosing. This is for educational and entertainment purposes only. So let's do it. The identical twins communicated almost exclusively with each other, creating an intense and isolated world that would ultimately lead them down a tragic path. A trigger warning. This episode will discuss sensitive topics such as self-harm, psychosis, suicide, abuse, and neglect. So if this is not for you, please go take care of yourself and meet up with us in the next episode.
I had never heard of this case before. I'd never heard of the Silent Twins. It's very interesting. There's a lot to it.
I read a great book called The Silent Twins by Marjorie Wallace. She is a reporter that worked very closely with the twins and had access to all their diaries.
Amazing. She helped them so much.
She did.
Yeah.
She was an advocate for them as well.
Well, it was sad because everybody just kind of wanted to push them off to the side. And she was, no, we need to figure out what's going on here. So, and she really stepped in.
And she helped the world understand their story.
Mm-hmm.
Jen and Jennifer were born on April 11th, 1963 in Barbados, and they were raised in Wales. From an early age, they faced social rejection and bullying, which led them to develop a private language and withdraw into their own world. During their school years, they exhibited selective mutism, speaking only to each other and maintaining a close bond through creative writing. Their lives took a darker turn when they became involved in petty crime, leading to their admission to the Broadmoor, which is a very high security and isolated psychiatric hospital. And this was during their late teens. Their story took a very tragic turn in 1993 when one of the twins, Jennifer, died, leaving June to navigate her grief and eventually share the stories in interviews.
I want to talk about just the way that they grew up. I mean, they grew up in Wales. Wales is all there. There's no black people in school, and they got bullied because they were different, because they were black. There was no other black kids in that school. And I did read something that like they were actually let out of school early, 5 or 10 minutes early, because they were bullied so bad, so they could get home before all the other kids got out, which is really sad because they were already going through what they were going through. And, you know, they didn't really talk to anybody. They both had speech impediments, and everybody thought that they had their own, what is that word? Cryptophagia?
Mm-hmm. Or
which is
idioglossia. Idioglossia is another term for it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's like the sister term for it. But so nobody, even their parents couldn't really understand.
Let's explain to the listeners what it is. You want to tell?
Okay. So the roots are Greek. So you got kryptos, which means hidden, and you got phasis, which is speech. So it's basically hidden speech. But they were
so their own little special language.
Mm-hmm. And what it basically came down to is they were actually speaking English, but they also had speech impediments, both of them. And they were also throwing some Creole slang in there. So they, even their parents couldn't understand what they thought. They were speaking their own made up language. But it turns out later, I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but they slowed down tapes of them speaking, and they slowed them down, and they were actually speaking English, but it was just really low and fast. And with their speech impediment, everybody thought it was made up language, but it was not.
Yes. And I'm glad you brought up the point how culturally this was very hard for them, right? Growing up in Wales and going to school as the two only Black girls in the school.
Hmm.
So not only were they very unique in the sense that they're twins, because identical twins, we should point out they are identical twins,
Yeah.
are pretty rare. And then on top of it, they're from Barbados, and it was really hard for them to kind of integrate into the peers in school. And so these girls became extremely isolated. And to your point, they had a speech impediment, and their mother stated that they had very delayed speech.
Hmm.
And then when
They
they
would like
did start
they would like point a lot at like what they wanted. They didn't even talk to their mom, really.
right, and then when they did start talking, it was mostly just to each other.
Hmm.
And when she would overhear them and things, it was just this very fast speech that was hard to understand. And
Yeah.
as you mentioned, they caught it on recorder because in later on, when they got a little bit older, they got in touch with a psychologist and speech pathologist, and they were trying to get the girls to talk to them, and they wouldn't do it. And so they put a tape recorder in the room and left the room and caught it on tape and slowed it down and heard that that was just a very fast, mostly English language with some Creole in it, which
Yeah.
I thought was very interesting.
But yeah, I thought that was, I mean, and then I don't know if you've listened to, is it June or Jennifer? June's her interviews that she does a lot now. I think she's in her 60s or something now.
Do you want to describe to the listeners kind of what it sounds like?
Well, I can totally understand her.
Mhm.
It is different. It's a different way to speak. She doesn't really she keeps her teeth clenched, and she does talk very rapidly, but she keeps her teeth clenched, and it's so I can understand. She's been doing interviews and stuff after her twin passed away. She's been doing a lot of interviews, and she talks a lot more. She still writes all that. So you can understand her, but I can just imagine whenever they were younger, it was even harder for people to understand what they were talking about and think they were speaking some kind of secret language or something that they made up.
And then they also had some other odd behaviors as well. You mentioned they were bullied a lot and they were let out of school early, which I mean, poor them.
Instead of, I don't know, telling people not to bully, they just like push them, okay, get out of here before you get bullied. It wasn't like fixing the problem. It was like
Exactly.
sweeping them off to the side, and yeah, it's just a different time.
And they would mimic each other's behaviors and they would move very slow.
Hmm.
So when they were walking home from school, they would be in a single line, one in front of the other, in very slow, methodical movements that were very in sync with each other.
Just mimicked and mirrored each other.
Right. And it was like there was this secret bondage. At first, it seemed they would not speak to other people. There was with selective mutism, there is usually a high degree of social anxiety, which
Why
fits,
you
right?
can
That
you can
that tracks
imagine.
here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but then there was this. It became an expectation. They wouldn't almost allow each other to do anything else. When one would try to maybe speak out to someone, the other one would give a look or something, and it
Yeah.
was like
And it
they
was,
made this secret pact.
yeah, so it was, I did read some stuff about that. It was, I think they were born 10 minutes apart or something like that. But
Yes,
it
June was
was,
born first, and then Jennifer followed 10 minutes later.
and then I think it was Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she would look to June and she'd be like, am I allowed to answer or am I allowed? And then she'd give her a signal, okay, go ahead and answer, or, give a sign or point to something. But
Mhm.
they always look to each other.
I think
Am I
yes,
allowed to speak?
right, and I think it went both ways, but I think oftentimes it was Jennifer that tried to control June's behaviors, but I
Yeah.
do think that it did go both ways. In their very young childhood, they were exclusively just communicating with each other, and then the behaviors kinda started with, like I mentioned, the walking, and then became this food obsession. They would control each other. They would either completely fast or they would binge.
They would like, take turns.
So some odd eating behaviors, and it was some body dysmorphia. They wanted the slimming disease. They always wanted their cheeks to be very sunken in and slim, and always comparing if one looked thinner than the other.
the other one has to catch up or match the other. If you have a twin and everybody's like, oh my, you guys are just identical, you're the same, that I don't know what that would do to you. And you can't be your own person. And then if one loses a couple pounds, you feel like, well, I have to lose a couple pounds because we're the same. And then I don't know, man. Yeah, it's a trip.
I think that's a really good point that you brought up, because I think there was this push and pull throughout their childhood of being a collective unit and then being individuals fighting.
Well,
They wanted to be their own individuals, but then they would cling onto each other in a single identity.
and the more I read into it, it was that constant frustration that they wanted to be individuals, but they also couldn't be without the other person. And it created this angst and this anxiety, like, I love you, but I can't stand you.
They were also there was one other sister, I think her name was Rose or Rosie,
That was the
that shared
youngest.
yes, and she shared a bedroom with them for a while,
Mhm.
and during that time, they would speak to her as well, but nobody else. They became
Yeah.
more and more withdrawn from the family, but very much loved their family. They would sneak and get them gifts and things like that.
Yeah. The youngest girl, the last one that was born after the twins, they spoke to her, but their two other older siblings, they really never spoke to.
They were very childlike for a long time, even up until their early teens. They would play with dolls. They had these very elaborate
Yes, they did.
stories about their dolls. They would make them, and some of them were very macabre and morbid, the stories that they would come up with of
Well,
ways
didn't
that their
they?
dolls would die and things like that.
Yeah. Didn't they come up with, well, this doll married this doll and this doll died? And I think that's where their creativity later in life came from, like in their diaries and stuff. And they started writing stories. They were actually very, very intelligent and they were very creative as well. They could have made some movies and stuff that,
Well, one of them wrote a book, I believe it was June. She got it published. It was called The Coca-Cola Addict, I believe.
yes, the Coca-Cola,
Coca-Cola Addict. Yeah.
Pepsi Cola out.
Oh, no.
Don't do that. Trademark.
I committed a sin. Okay, the Pepsi Cola Addict.
It was the Pepsi Cola Addict. Yeah.
Okay,
And
my apologies,
yes.
Pepsi.
So June wrote, it was a novella. She was 16 years old whenever she wrote that.
And it took several years for it to get published, but she did not give up.
No, she actually paid 800 pounds of money that she saved up, and it actually got published in 1982. They gave her a single copy in return, but it's thought that less than 10 original copies even survived. So there's probably only 10 copies of that book on Earth.
Wow. Okay, if you're out there in the world and you have a copy, email me.
Love to get our hands on that.
They were receiving services like speech therapy, psychotherapy. During, I think it was some point in their teens, they started getting assistance. I think it's what we would consider like disability checks, but they would go directly to the girls. And so that's how they had all this money to spend on writing materials, and they would order things and have them delivered. They would have typewriters and paper, and they would order magazines and all these things, and just stay in the room together and stay up all night and write. And I think, to your point, they use that writing as an outlet and were very creative that way.
Well, I mean, I can only imagine if you only talk to each other and you're out in the public and you're going to school and everything. And I mean, where else you're holding everything in? You feel like you can only talk to each other. That probably created a flood of just creativity. Where else are you going to pour it all out? Yeah, exactly. Have an outlet. I have all this stuff in, but I can't talk to people. All the things that are inside of you, all your emotions, everything, like, where do you put them? So it came out in creative ways. Their teenage years started becoming more mature and wanted to start seeing boys and drinking and just doing what teenagers do.
Yes, teenagers, they have this desire to be social. And, hormones are happening and things. And they met these boys, the Kennedy boys.
Yep.
Who were American. And I have to say, these girls were obsessed with anything American. They just thought everything American was so exciting. They were just enamored, and these boys were troublemakers, right? And they introduced the girls to alcohol. And I think for the first time in their lives, they felt uninhibited, which felt really good. And uninhibited in speech and other things. So they became very involved in sex and
Hmm.
drugs, and they were sniffing glue. These Kennedy boys were very much into crime and arson. And after they moved away, there was this big void for June and Jennifer after the boys moved away. They couldn't really connect with any other teenagers other than sexual encounters, which then kind of they started having bad reputations and people started talking very more negatively about them.
The first one that lost her virginity. So the two boys that you're talking about, they were really interested in the first boy, but then he had a brother. So the first brother blew him off. This could be lore, but it's rumored that I don't remember which sister she lost her virginity first to the second brother. And then a week later, the other sister lost her virginity to the same brother. They were like in competition and just like, well, if she did it, I'm going to do it.
And it goes back to that love-hate relationship with them. They were so competitive with each
Mhm.
other and they wanted their own identities, but then it's like, we have to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
And here you add alcohol and drugs into the mix and teenage hormones, and they're just uninhibited. And then when the boys moved away, they're looking for an outlet, and they became very involved in crime and breaking into places, they being June and Jennifer.
It was a
Yeah.
tractor store. Yeah.
Yeah.
They set it on fire.
And
And then
they
they just
loved it,
sat.
watching it burn.
Yeah. They watched it burn. And it was like, we did that.
Well, I wanted to quote June. She said, "Arsonists are only looking for sexual fulfillment." So
I didn't come
I think she was
across that
somewhat
one.
insightful.
Breaking and entering, theft, vandalism. They also attempted to burn a department store. So, but this is all, so they were 18 or 19 years old when all this was going on. And this is the first time they started getting into the court system.
And
So,
that is what led to their admission to the Broadmoor, which is a very high security psychiatric hospital in London. And it wasn't for treatment, it was for confinement and controlling behavior.
Well, it was, and it housed some very, very bad people too. So
And it was a mix, right?
Yeah, they were in there with murderers and serial
Mm-hmm.
killers and all kinds of stuff.
People with severe mental illness and then people that just had some personality disorders.
And then also they were the youngest women ever to be admitted into the Broadmoor at that time.
Just imagine this very strict, high security psychiatric hospital mixed in with all of these others. And the judge sentenced them to an undetermined amount of time.
Yep.
So they could have just stayed there forever.
Yeah. They ended up being there for 11 years?
I think it was 10 or 11. Yeah, it was a long time. I mean, not saying that what they did wasn't terrible.
Well, yeah, you can't do that stuff. You have to pay
11 years for these two girls, the first offenders.
They were just, first offender, 19 years old, or, teenagers that just got into some shit. I mean, come on, man. That's harsh. Undetermined is what blows my mind. If they would have said 3 years.
I think it said indefinite, actually. It was indefinite.
It was indefinite.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know.
It's horrible.
Little side note here.
Do tell.
Famous residents at the Broadmoor.
Yes, do tell.
Included some of the most notorious names in British criminal history. So they were here with these people. I haven't looked up these people because we don't live there and we're not familiar with them because we're American.
We're not from London.
But a man named Peter Sutcliffe, he was deemed the Yorkshire Ripper.
That sounds terrible.
They were in there with him.
What was his name?
Peter Sutcliffe.
Oof.
And then there's another guy named Ronnie Kray, spelt with a K, Kray. He was one of another set of twins, the infamous Kray twins, who had ruled the East End criminal underworld.
Ooh.
So they were in there. They were in there with those guys.
Wow.
And they're just 19 and they just set a couple fires.
Yeah, they're going to improve their mental health, right? No. They were seen by a doctor at the Broadmoor. Dr. Hamilton categorized them as psychopaths, which is really interesting because psychopathic behavior would indicate a persistent pattern of that irresponsible and aggressive criminal type behavior. So they didn't have that background. It wasn't
No, they
persistent.
didn't.
It was a moment in time.
Yeah. They get a little drunk, smoke some weed, and they go start some trouble.
And this was after they had been around those boys that kind of took them down this path, right?
Yeah.
So I don't agree with that. I'm not diagnosing, I'm not undiagnosing, but I thought that was interesting that he categorized them as psychopaths.
That would be like if whenever I was that age and I was causing all kinds of trouble and shit, I was getting into
Now, do you want to get into that?
if somebody called me psychopathic, well, I wouldn't take it that far. Yes, I'm a troublemaker, but come on, man. I was scaling the building and I broke into the Hotel Clovis.
Like Spider-Man?
Yes, exactly. I was scaling the ladders on the outside and I got picked up by the cops. Dad was working at right across the street at Phillips Music. Mom was working down at Fabric Mart and they picked me up. I was in the back of a squad car. I was 11 years old. And I was like, well, my dad works there. My mom works down there. And they're like, well, where do you want us to take you? To Fabric Mart. Because I
Take
didn't
me
want
to my mama.
I was like, no, I'm not dealing with my dad. Nope. Actually, mom was pissed. So I probably should have gone to dad's shop.
I don't think we ever damaged anything. I hope you didn't. I don't know. Maybe don't say on.
I don't think I ever. I didn't
Definitely no
really.
fires were started.
No, I never started. Well, I did one time.
In a building?
I started a dumpster fire in an alley. I did do that. I lit a match and I threw some trash in and threw a match in, and the cops were actually called and fire engines came and everything. And I was like, yeah, I did that shit.
I'm so sad that you don't have kids. You don't have- you
I don't
have
need
the-
kids, man. Could you imagine the kids that I would have that would pay me back for all the dumb shit that I did when I was young?
Yeah, thank you for sharing your childhood
Yeah.
with us.
All right. Story time with Steve.
Later, while the girls were still at the Broadmoor, they were diagnosed with schizophrenia, which is very interesting. I'm not seeing the symptoms of schizophrenia, but again, I
Right.
didn't assess them in person. I am not their provider. They did have some paranoia. They were put on several different medications. I have Jennifer on an antipsychotic. She was receiving injections. Some side effects from that can be extrapyramidal side effects, which are abnormal movements, and also cardiac side effects. She was also on a medication called benzhexol, which is used to treat the side effects like those movements, the EPS movements.
Mm.
Then June, she recorded in her diary that she was taking 13 tablets a day. And then June was on an antipsychotic as well. And then she was on a second one called stelazine. So they had these girls pretty drugged up. And in their diaries, they were upset because they felt so groggy and they were writing less and they felt like their creativity was gone. It was dulling them.
So they tried to separate them, even though they wanted to be individuals. Whenever they separated them, it did not work out well. They couldn't even see each other. They were in totally different places, but they would still mimic each other without even being able to see each other. And then they would take like back and forth. I just hit my mic.
Sorry,
Then
listeners.
yeah, my bad.
There
But
is
then
a
they
thing
would.
called twin telepathy. I mean, it's kind
That's
of been
very real.
well, yeah, there's no scientific proof, but there are a lot of examples, aren't there? Anecdotal examples of it.
I remember listening to I don't know how many examples of twins. One of them wakes up and they're having a nightmare and that something happened to their twin, and it turns out something did happen to them. How did they know that? There's like my twin is in trouble, and then yeah, they actually were. It's just some kind of telepathy stuff. And this is whenever they really started writing a lot.
They would get magazines and they would make these little tiny notes. And there was a picture of them in the book that I read, and it looked like I don't know, symbols, but they're so tiny.
They
but
did it super tiny.
super tiny. And they would just ride around like the edges and in circles.
Yeah. But yeah, they were trying to separate them and everything. And they would go catatonic, alternate between not eating and then I did see a video, a footage of one of and she's just catatonic and she's not moving at all.
Right.
Like a
The staff
zombie.
would have to like lift them into
Mhm.
bed
Yeah.
because they were so catatonic.
And then at the same time, they were glad to be away from each other because at this point, I think that's when they started even expressing that they hated each other. But then they
Oh, go ahead.
couldn't. Well, then they also couldn't stand to be away from each other, even though they couldn't stand each other. They're like,
Right.
I can't stand this person. I can't stand my twin, but I also can't be away from them.
And they would even ask to be separated because there was still this desire of being an individual. But again,
Mhm.
yes, when they were apart, they did not eat, they were not engaged, they wouldn't then they didn't have anyone to talk to because they didn't have each other, right?
Yeah, so it's even like more isolation on top of
And
what
they just
was already there.
and they became super obsessed with death during this time.
Yeah.
And they were not eating like you said, they were either starving or binging. They were obsessed with this slimming disease. Some quotes June wrote in one of her journals, "You're strong. If I die, you'll get over it fast. Don't die before me, please. Let me die first."
And
And then
that was June, correct?
that was June about Jennifer. And then Jennifer, in her writing, said June was possessed by a demon and that she should get rid of her forever. So they were having homicidal thoughts about each other. And then they were so scared the other one would die first. They're like, please don't die before me. But then they had these thoughts of killing the other one so that they could be released from these bonds.
They actually tried. I think we skipped over that part. I
Yeah,
was
bring that
earlier
up.
before they went to the Broadmoor, I believe, right?
Yes, yes.
I don't remember which one. They tried to strangle the other one with like a radio cord, and then the other one pushed one into a river or a lake or something like that.
I think it was a river. Mhm.
And then they both cried and hugged each other, and they were like, "I'm sorry, I tried to kill you. I'm sorry, I tried to kill you."
This was very intense.
I was probably in the late 80s or possibly the early 90s. It's pretty unclear, but that's whenever everything shifted. And it was kind of this pact that took place that they both realized that for the other one to live, one of them had to die. And that is where it really shifts. Yeah, one of them had to die for the other one to be free because they couldn't both be there at the same time, which is, man, that's dark.
It is very dark. And Jennifer actually passed away. That was on March 9th, 1993, when she was just 29 years old. In Jennifer's diary in January, mind you, she passed away at the beginning of March. In January, she wrote, I have at last conquered my fear of death, and now I am no longer a baby, but a woman. I can see it. Oh, yes, Lord. Now I can see. So Jennifer wrote that in her diary, January 24th, and then she died March 9th.
That is very eerie. And then another eerie thing is Marjorie Wallace, that was working with them, described Jennifer telling her, I'm going to die. We've decided. She didn't say, I might. She didn't say, I'm afraid I will. It was a statement. I am going to die.
And Marjorie asked her, how do you know that? And she said, I just know.
And then you want to get into when it happened. Like, it's such
Yeah.
the timing of it.
So they're at the Broadmoor for 11 years, and then they get transferred to
It was,
Birmingham.
they had been waiting for 11 years, and this was like a undisclosed time that they were, they could have spent their entire lives there. But they
Mhm.
finally get out. They're making progress. They're getting transferred to a lower security place where they can actually start to regain their lives and everything. And it's at that point, I'll let you take it from there.
Well, during the transport from the Broadmoor to the other facility, Jennifer becomes despondent. and June can't wake her up. They take her to this other facility. The doctor comes in and assesses her, doesn't think it's a big deal, but then gets lab work done. Once they get the lab results back, the doctor pays attention because her labs are way off and she ends up passing away. They can't wake her up, and she passed away of myocarditis, which is an inflammation of the heart muscle.
Mm. It kind of broke my heart because from everything that I read, so a couple of days leading up to their release from there, she wasn't really feeling real well. They thought she had flu-like symptoms, quieter than normal, even though they're known as silent twins. She really wasn't engaging in anything. But then as they're leaving Broadmoor, they're not even that far out of Broadmoor, and she lays her head down on her sister's shoulder, and then she just passed away after that. That was it. And it's
And
like,
it's so sad, isn't it?
and then it's that pact. Did she will herself to die?
I will say this, when Marjorie visited the girls before they got transported, she said that Jennifer looked almost emaciated, very thin, whereas June looked healthy.
Mm.
So I don't know. I mean, people can draw their own conclusion. We don't really know what happened.
No, it's just a mystery. It's like, how does that happen?
Well, and endocarditis that killed her is usually caused by a virus, but the blood work didn't show that she had any virus. And
Yeah, there was
another
no
cause,
poison, no trauma,
poison. That's what I was saying.
no nothing.
Another cause could be poison, but they didn't. I don't know
Nothing
what
in
tests
there.
they ran, but they didn't disclose any poisoning.
Yeah.
But as we learned, the psychiatric medications can cause heart conditions, not usually endocarditis. If she was starving, she may be more at risk for problems with her heart. But it is a very odd picture, though, I have to say. Yeah, I'm going to read a quote from June. And this is after Jennifer passed away. She said, "At long last, I am all June. I am not part of Jennifer. Somebody had to break the vicious cycle. We were a burden to each other."
Yeah, that's
I just can't imagine that they had that much power over each other,
mm-hmm.
that they
And
can become, individuals.
and then another thing that June said after Jennifer passed away, and this is a direct quote. June said on her podcast, she said, "Jennifer has given me the gift of life. She's done it."
I don't know if anyone has come out and asked her. I didn't
Yeah,
see
I
it
don't know.
anywhere. Did you? If
Mm-mm.
they planned that, or if Jennifer did anything to end her life?
I have no idea. I don't think she said anything.
Well, I wanted to read the entry of Jennifer's last poem before she passed away. It says, "That too was our laughing, that too was our smiling. Now I am dead, and that too is your crying."
Wow.
Something that's really interesting as well, Marjorie went to visit June at her new facility 5 days after Jennifer passed. And she described June as very poised and wearing a t shirt that said, "I am sexier than this t shirt," and that she was speaking very freely and eloquently. And June said, "I feel like I might be on a high." And this is 5 days after her sister passed away.
Wow. And she did. She started speaking a lot, and she does
Mhm.
interviews and all kinds of stuff now. And she's very outspoken. She's like very much willing to talk about it. It's a very different story than we've ever heard before.
Very different. So we didn't talk that much about the parents, but Aubrey was the father and Gloria was the mother, and they were both from Barbados. Aubrey, he was in traffic control, but then he joined the Royal Air Force. And so they were
RAF.
moving around a lot from different base housing. And that was another issue with them growing up. Not only were they the only Black girls in the class, they were twins, they had a speech impediment, and they were kind of, gypsies moving
They were
around a lot.
going around everywhere.
So that became very difficult. But after Jennifer passed, Aubrey said that when they were born, he was told that twins were a blessing. Gloria's response was that the twins were very mysterious. And she said, "It is so odd. I don't know. Something is strange."
Whoa, I didn't know. Wow.
That was what the mom said.
Okay.
So, in the Barbadian society, there is a lot of superstitions and spiritual significance around twins. They're often viewed as special or mystical, and believed to possess special powers, and that they were a blessing, a good fortune, a favor of deities, and that often there were special rituals around the birth of twins. So, now I just wanted to talk a little bit about the psychology and psychiatry aspects of the story, not diagnosing or undiagnosing anyone. Just wanted to kind of use it as a sounding board for discussion. So, we talked about that selective mutism. This can be pretty common among kiddos. It's characterized by an inability to speak in certain social situations. So, they can be extremely anxious in social situations. But selective mutism isn't just about not speaking and social anxiety. It can often be an underlying reason that that child is choosing not to speak. And it's very important to treat that. So, really getting a good assessment history of what's going on at school and at home and trying to understand is this behavior just happening at school or just happening at home? And if so, kind of what's going on in that environment? Or is it global? Is it happening everywhere? And then we talked about the idioglossia, the private language that often happens with twins. It can be pretty common,
And
but then
it's got different terms, right? Are they all the same? Cryptophagia and then idioglossia, is that how you say it?
uh yes,
And then, like you said, also selective
mutism.
mutism. Yeah, kind of all the same thing, correct? Or am I wrong?
No, the selective mutism is that that child won't talk around certain people or any
Okay,
people.
all right,
Idioglossia is the actual language that the twins are speaking.
okay.
Yeah, good question. Then I wanted to talk a little bit about attachment issues. So, it's attachment issues can be a trauma response, and that's a difficulty forming attachments from early on. So, it seems like they had a very insecure attachment style. So, even with their parents, even their mother, they were not very close with. So that's another aspect. And so there was this cycle of bullying and then insecure attachment and then social withdrawal, which led to more isolation, which led to decreased mental health, which led to them being bullied more. And then it's just this vicious cycle that keeps going, leading to a lot of psychological distress that just kind of worsen their situation.
And
And
isn't it kind of, I mean, it makes total sense. And there was the twin Jennifer's that's still alive. She actually said that nobody could understand them and they were being bullied and everything. And every time they talked, people couldn't understand them. So they just like on purpose, well, then we're just not going to talk anymore. It's like that cycle of it just made it worse and worse because they're like, well, we are trying to talk, but nobody can understand us. So now we're really not going to talk, which is
right, it's just this
that's sad.
cycle of it is
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to talk about is a diagnosis called shared psychotic disorder. And this is also known as folie et deux, and it's a French term meaning a delusion held by two. And this term was coined by French psychiatrists. I'm going to say these wrong, but I'll do my best. Lazau and Folie, and that was way back in 1877.
I think you nailed it.
You think? Did
Yep.
I sound France?
I,
So this is a delusion held by two, and usually there is a primary person that has the delusion, and then there's the secondary person is more gullible and susceptible, and they're kind of pulled into that primary person's delusion. If separated, the secondary person can lose the delusion. So in treatment, they should be separated. So actually, they were doing the right thing. Although we saw with June and Jennifer, it didn't really help when they were separated.
no.
When they were together, they would fight or do these odd behaviors. And when they were separated, they become catatonic and not eat until they were separated by death, which is just tragic and horrible.
Well, that's the hardest. That's the one thing I can't wrap my brain around. So they didn't want to be together, but they also wanted to be separate. Then that pact came in, and here we are.
Almost all cases of folie à deux are within a family, like sister, sister, mother, child, husband, wife. It can be very resistant to treat. It's usually treated with talk therapy, and the therapist does not challenge the belief. They don't agree with it. They don't feed into it. They talk about it and mostly focus on the distress that it's causing that person. And then after a while, start doing some reality testing with the individual. Medication is usually not involved. However, if there is very severe agitation, antipsychotics can be used. There were some other classic Folie Deux examples.
Really?
One was the Papin sisters back in 1933. Lee and
Okay.
Christine, they were two sisters from France that held delusions that led to a brutal murder of their employer and her daughter.
Okay, hold on. I have
And
to write this down because I want to look it up. What are they? What?
the Papin sisters, Papin. I didn't do any research on them, but I'm pretty sure I need to look into that.
Happened, sister.
Lee and Christine. Then the second one I jotted down was called Gothic Relationship, and it was back in the 90s.
Okay.
Two women shared a delusion that they were connected through supernatural bonds, and they had these very bizarre rituals. I would love to learn about what these rituals were, but it led to some kind of legal issues.
Okay.
So sounds like illegal, bizarre rituals,
I'll have to check
if
that
you will.
out.
Yeah. So I think that these two were very complex. I don't think there was one thing going on. I think there was a lot going on. You had the bullying, them being seen as outcasts, them having speech impediments, the social isolation. It was a very complex phenomenon that was going on.
I think everything just lined up just in the
Terribly.
right terrible time. Yeah, exactly. I guess to wrap it up, like on my part, is this family deserves to have their story recognized. It's not to be treated lightly like, wow, this was weird. But I'm just glad that a lot more knowledge and recognition goes into this type of behavior now than back then. And just, I hope we treated it with care and a lot of respect.
Beautifully said. Good job. I love that. And thank you all for joining us today. If you have any twin stories or stories of breaking into buildings as a child, but again, we don't advise it, we don't recommend it, but
No, definitely
those
not.
fun childhood stories, send them to us. In addition to episode topics that you would like to hear in the future, psychloresarah@gmail.com or psychloresteve@gmail.com. Hey, we'll see you next week.
Peace.